This video is sponsored by Game Toppers. Turn your own kitchen or dining room table into a premium portable game solution at a fraction of the cost. Hey everybody, welcome to Drive Thru Review 747. Today I'm going to talk about Dune Imperium Rise of Ix. Now this is the expansion to my favorite game of last year, Dune Imperium. And so what this expansion adds is a bunch of new stuff. You're going to be covering up the existing board with a couple of little boards, and one of those will be off to the side of the board. There's a bunch of new cards and stuff like that. There's a new game mode. Just a lot of new stuff. It doesn't really change the player count or do anything really too drastic to like the core mechanics, but all of the little changes definitely add up over time. So let's go down to the table. I'll go quickly over some of the new additions. If you're not familiar with the game, I'll put a link to my original review below, but there's a bunch of reviews that you can check out, and also how to play videos and stuff like that. But go ahead and we'll get to the table and I'll come back and tell you what I think. Okay, so I got some various things set up around the table here. First, let's talk about the changes to the game board. So you have here the Landsrad Council. This goes over the top of the old one. We'll talk about that. And then we'll go here to the Ix board. This is where you get a lot of the technologies and stuff. You set this one off to the side. So let's zoom into these and then we'll go over some of the new cards and things like that after. Now this side of the Landsrad board is unchanged. So you've got all the same stuff, the High Council, the Mentat. You've got the Sword Master where you're going to get your extra worker agent to place onto the board. Now over on this side of here we have the Chom Directorate here. This is what's going to replace the old one. Now in the old one, you used to basically convert spice into money, and that was kind of one of the main ways that you went and got enough money to get your extra worker, which is very important in the game. Now over here, we've got a kind of more roundabout way of doing it. You've got two worker placement spots. You can go here or here, right? And of course you need the triangle to get out there. So you need a card here, of course, with the triangle on the side to play it. And you have got two options here, and you're going to have a little disc here. Every player will have a disc there in that bottom row. And if you go here to this top spot, then you get kind of two activations on this track there. And when you activate this little symbol here, it lets you activate the kind of Chom track. You can either go up, or you can spend the activation to go drop all the way to the bottom. So in this case, let's just say we go here, we go bam, bam, and so we go up two spots. Now, if we were already, let's say we were already here at the second spot, we could use our first one to go up. If we placed here, we get the one activation. Then we can use our second one to drop all the way down. And depending on where you drop down from, you can activate all of these actions on the right there. So if we take a look in closer, let's pretend in this case that we were at the top and we had that extra activation to use. So this spot here allows you to buy one of the tech tiles from Ix over on that side of the board for 2 cheaper spice. You're always spending spice to give to the folks over at Ix so you can get some of their technologies. This one here, you get to deploy 2 troops and you get to go up the influence on one of the factions. And here you have a choice. You either get 2 spice or you get 5 money, and every other player gets 1 money. And you can activate these in any order as you drop down. So even though maybe you're dropping down from the top, you now have access to all 3 of those. So you could execute these in some different order. So maybe you might get the spice here, which will help you spend for maybe a very expensive tech tile that you're getting a discount on. And maybe one of these activations here on going up the influence track will give you some other access to some other resource. So you can spend them as it's most desirable for you. Now the other spot over here is similar. You just get the 1 activation, again, either moving up or dropping down. And then you also get $1 in that case, kind of a consolation prize space. Now, speaking of the Ix board, you've got 2 spots here. The first spot on the top will allow you to, if you place your worker there, your agent, you will first off get 1 extra influence. You can see the blue diamond there at the top. That gives you 1 extra influence in the card buying phase of the round. So if you're familiar with the game, you've got influence that you might get from your reveal step or from the High Council or some other things. Those will give you an extra influence to use then. Or you can buy a tech tile, which we'll look at in a minute, for a discount of 1 spice. If you don't want to do that, you see the little symbol to the right here, right there. You can take and put one of your troops, these guys here, or if you have the basic game, you can just have cubes, and you'll put them right down there. And as they live there, they will perpetually give you a -1 discount to one of the spice tiles. And you can have multiple little troops there, because they're kind of like negotiators, if you want to say that. And when you do go to buy technology, you can spend or not spend those as you wish to give you that discount. And multiple players can all have their negotiating troops there. Now the next thing you can do here is you can go here. You have to spend also $3, and then you can get your dreadnought. And each player has 2 of these dreadnought tokens here. You can see these wooden kind of spaceship things. I'll talk about those more in a minute. And that's the main way that you get dreadnoughts. There's some other ways through some intrigue cards and things like that, but that's the main way. And then you can also purchase a tech tile for full price, minus any discounts you might have from negotiators there and so on. So they're kind of the new spots on the board. Let's take a look at some of these tech tiles. I'll give you a better angle of those. They are always going to be in these kind of 3 stacks like that, face up, with the top one face up. But let's take a look at a couple of them in more detail. I'll give you kind of an idea what they do. So I just want to show you some of the different styles that you have. There's a lot in here. They do lots of different things. They're all really cool. So you can see this one here, Shuttle Fleet, for example. You spend the 6 spice, minus any discounts, of course. And then you have a kind of permanent ability. So at the start of every round, you get 2 money. When you purchase this, though, you can see this. You get to choose one of the influence tracks with one of the factions and go up 1 step. If we look at this one here, this costs 3 spice, and this has kind of a once per round activation. If you see this little symbol here, it means flip that tile, and then at the beginning of the round it'll unflip. And so you can deploy a troop with that, with the little cube there. Now here's another one, just for fun. This one you spend 4 spice, you get 2 intrigue cards when you buy it, and this one has an end game condition there. So you will win the tiebreakers there. So that's one thing there. So this would be some end game ones. Here, this one is like, it costs only 2, but you get an extra kind of purchasing power when you get to the card step and stuff like that. This one gives you water when you win conflicts. So some of these are good to have. And there's some cards and stuff that will interact with some of those as well. So there's a good variety of those. But again, your spice is not solely to convert to money, to spend on other things, as well as getting your extra troop and so on. It's going to be used to get these tech tiles, which could help you get money, help you do other things. And again, going up here is where you're going to get a pretty good cash injection there of getting that $5, which would get you on your way to purchasing the extra worker, which again is very important. Now moving to some of the cards and stuff that are different. This is just going to be kind of haphazard because there's just a lot of different stuff here. There's some new conflict cards. A lot of them interact with some of those different tracks I showed you. This one especially, this is a tier 3 one. You can actually get quite a few victory points out of this one. So if you win this battle, right, you get a victory point, and you have the option to spend 6 money and or 4 spice to get 2 and maybe even 3 victory points out of that card, which is huge at the end of the game. I mean, that's probably a game ender right there. So there's a bunch of other cards though that you mix in. You don't really mix the deck any differently. You've got the same level 1, 2, and 3 cards there. You've also got here, I'm not going to show you any of these actually. These are the intrigue cards. You get a nice stack of these. They add a good variety. They interact with the new stuff. These are kind of fun to kind of come out as a surprise. I like that. Some players don't like that, but there's a lot of stuff in here that can happen. So you've got to be very wary of what can occur there. I do want to show you in some detail some of the cards that are going to be part of the player's main deck here. So these are now the whole stack of purchasable cards. You can see here the influence cost and so on. I want to show you some details about some of the new sort of icons and mechanics with some of the cards. Now this one, for example, here you can see you've got the triangle there, but you've also got this little sort of half a person. You can hardly see it there. What that means is if you go to a triangle space like this one here, even if somebody is already placed their worker there, if it has this symbol here, that means you can also go to a spot that already has somebody else's worker there. So it allows that. Now the other new thing on this card is you can see this is the kind of the reveal strip. So here's the action strip. It doesn't do anything when you play it other than allowing you to go to the space. If you hold this card for the reveal step, you'll still get your 3 money just like before. You can also get that 3 money if you have another card that triggers a discard. That's what this little down arrow means, or a remove from game effect. So if you have a card that allows you to remove another card from the game, and this is the one that you choose to remove, you'll also get this kind of reward here, which would normally be part of your reveal step. You can also get it if you discard it or remove from the game. So you'll see this icon on a few different cards in here. Like for example, this one, you can move up on the CHOAM track or drop down if you discard it or remove from the game or reveal it. Now here is another one here. You can see which might work in tandem with that. So when we use this card during the action step, we'll place in one of these places, and then this says discard another card and get a spice and a water. Well, this could be the card that you discarded, right? So you would get the 3 money from this because it triggered the discard effect, and then now you've paid the cost here of the discard and you can get this reward there. So we've got that like so. Just another example here. So if you have 2 Fremen influence, you can discard another card, get 2 spice, and so on. There's some other funky ones like this one here. If you have 2 influence with one of these different factions, you can get multiple rewards and so on. So these are the main mechanics here. This discard, remove from game step, and then the ability then, like I showed you here, to be able to place alongside another worker. And there's some other effects and things that interact with some of the tracks I showed you. One thing I want to show you is your starting deck. You can swap out one of your cards from the base game with this Control the Spice card. This is if you're playing the epic game. And so in that case, instead of playing to 10 points, you'll play to 12. And I think there's some different starting resources. I haven't actually played the epic game. There's actually an epic mode, and then there's like a scout mode, which if you download the app, you can play with that. That looks pretty interesting. Haven't played with that either. But this option is there to play with that. Now the last thing we're going to talk about here are these new leaders here, these new houses and factions that you can be a part of. There's quite a few of these, and I'm just going to kind of go through them because I think this to me is probably the second biggest change over the dreadnoughts and stuff like that, which I'll talk about at the end. So here you've got Una Moritani. So you start the game with no water. Remember, you normally start with water. Whenever you gain money, then you get an extra money. And so she's hopefully generating lots of money. You can spend 7 money when you do your signet action, and you can go up any influence track, get a troop and a spice. Here we've got Archduke Armand Ikaz. And then the reveal turn, if you have at least 2 agents on these types of board spaces, you may trash one of your cards in play. So one of the cards you played this turn. Your signet action is you may acquire a card that costs 3 influence or less. So you're going to be kind of turning through your deck and getting new cards, hopefully, that maybe interact with that trash and discard mechanic. Here, Viscount Hundro Moritani. At the start of the game, look at the top 2 cards of the intrigue deck, keep 1, put the others back on top. And on your signet, you can discard a spice to move up CHOAM. Here's Ikaz, Eliza Ikaz. So round start, set aside a card from your hand. At the start of your second turn in a round, reveal that card and return it to your hand. If you use to send an agent this turn, it is exactly 1 agent icon. Then you get a spice, otherwise you get a money. Then you can spend $1 when you play your signet to get one of the fold space cards, and these are the cards, if you don't remember, these let you go anywhere. They don't really do much except trash themselves, and then you draw a card there. So it's kind of a neglected spot sometimes. I mean, sometimes it's a good spot to go to, but this is kind of a nice freebie to get that, and because they are useful cards. And then I think there's 1 or 2 more here. Your dreadnoughts have a strength 4 instead of 3, which we'll talk about the dreadnoughts. And then when you do your signet, you can either purchase a tech card or send one of your negotiators. And then we have here, this is the last one. So here at game start, you get these snooper tokens, and these are the different snooper tokens you can get there. So put a snooper token at 2 influence on each influence track. Whenever you reach a snooper token, move it to the topmost uncovered space and take that reward. So as you start to go up different influence tracks, which is the key, you can start to cover these up and activate these. So discard, get a spice, gain the bonus token from this influence track, gain an influence on this influence track, gain the bonus from this influence track and 1 influence. So it kind of perpetuates itself, but you want to diversify your influence, but eventually you kind of start to catch up a little bit. And then when you do your signet, you can drop an influence, gain influence with a faction where you have a snooper token. So you can really juggle that. So that's all of the different leaders. And now let's talk about the dreadnoughts. So again, as you kind of deploy troops into your garrisons, you're going to get these guys out here, and then, you know, as you start to take certain actions, some of these are going to start to come into the battle and add to your battle. Now normally these are worth 2 combat strength each. The dreadnoughts themselves are worth 3, unless you have that special leader I showed you, which is they're worth 4. And then if this combat works its way the same way, you'll reveal cards on your reveal step to add to your combat strength. You may play intrigue cards and so on. And then the winner will get the victory card. And what's going to happen is all the troops committed, of course, are going to go back to the player's supply. If you put a dreadnought in there and you lost, it does not go back to the supply, it goes right back to your garrison. So it never really gets destroyed. So that's great. So if you took the effort to build the dreadnought, but you lost, you get it back. You don't have to like rebuy it or re-recruit it. Now, if you win with the dreadnought, you can go up to one of these spaces. Actually, you have to do this because you can have 2 dreadnoughts, up to 2 dreadnoughts in the game. If you win, you have to put one of those that was involved in the battle up on a spot here claiming one of these spots. Now, normally these are awarded to players through certain conflict cards. If they win, they kind of control that location. So when people go there, they get the bonus here. Now you can actually place this on top of existing ones and sort of temporarily retake control of that spot. Or that doesn't have to be anybody there. You can just go onto a spot if you really like it. And then that stays there and you're going to get the bonus until the end of the next combat. So it's going to sit out the next combat. So you're kind of down strength because you're kind of maintaining your foothold on, whatever battle theoretically that you had just won. So you can't just kind of keep abusing it in a way, sort of. So this is kind of a nice little mechanic there, allowing you to kind of reap some rewards on top of the battle that you just won, but also keeping them out of the fight a little bit. So it kind of prevents a little bit of the rich get richer kind of thing. So I think that's all the basic kind of mechanics and changes of the game. Let's go back to my talking head. Okay, so that was the Rise of X expansion for Dune Imperium. I'll do my normal kind of pillars of review here because I think it's appropriate. I don't review tons of expansions, but I really wanted to review this one because it was my favorite game from last year. And sort of a spoiler alert, I've been working on my top 50 games of all time and some other videos kind of in that vein, actually. And this is way high on my list. So it's a little spoiler there. So I really like this game, just to kind of come clean, so to speak. So anyway, so I'm just prefacing a little bit, but let's jump into my pillars and we'll talk more generally at the end. Player count. I've played this 1, 2, and 3 players. I've not played it with 4 yet. I don't know that it would change that much. And my kind of thoughts on the player count hasn't really changed at all with the base game thoughts, right? So I really like it at all, the player counts. I like it solo. I like a 2-player, I like a 3-player. Now, effectively, when you're playing, solo or 2-player, you're still playing 3-player because you have an AI bot kind of acting as the 2nd or 3rd player, depending on your player count. And it works really well. I mean, the solo and the bot in general works really, really well. It does the right, it's so easy. There's like almost zero bookkeeping. The one thing that they added in here, which is a nice rule, was in the base game, if you played with the deck of cards kind of driving the AI, it never bought any cards from the influence row. Like it would just sit there stagnant. Now, I think at the time of release of the base game, the app took care of that. Like you had the same deck of cards in the app. It was the exact same thing. You had the same sort of deck of cards when you flip through it. The one thing the app would do is it kind of would randomly buy cards out of the market just to kind of keep that market turning. Now, the solution here, which you could just play with the base game right now, you don't have to even have the expansion to do this, is you take 2d6, you roll both of them, and then you delete the cards that you roll. If you roll a 6, there's no 6th card in there, so you'll skip that. And if you roll the same number twice, 2 2s, you just still delete the 1 card. So anyway, it randomly goes through the buying for you. So this is a quick, simple rule. So it's just very easy. You don't even have to fire the app. I haven't used the app since I read the rule because I like that it turned through the row because I think it's just better. It's more fun. And it kind of, there's more variety and stuff to look at. It's more realistic. But you don't even need the app. You just roll the 2 dice and then away you go. And it kind of fixes sort of that issue. But yeah, so that's player count. I think it's great at all player counts. Play time, it's usually about an hour, hour and a half. I mean, it just depends. Games can go quick. I mean, it can be about an hour or so. I think once players kind of know, and you can have certain situations where players will kind of just do really well and win. But you're not really looking at anything much shorter than an hour, probably right over an hour. And I really don't think it would get much longer than an hour and a half. I mean, you could have a 2-hour game if there was like lots of kibitzing and gnashing of teeth. But I mean, this game lends itself to that, but not to such an egregious extent like lots of other games might, I mean, Twilight Imperium pops in my head. This game's nothing like that, but that kind of negotiating kind of thing is here, but it's not really here like in full force. So that even if you have some of that in your group, which can be a lot of fun, it's not really going to extend the game because it's not really 100% about that. So yeah, playtime, there you go, hour and a half. Now, usually what I do with this last pillar is sort of compare it, to what other games. I talked plenty about that in the review. I'm not really going to talk about that. What I'm going to do at this point, though, is compare it to like itself, because it's an expansion that's changing things. Again, I'll have the video below for the original if you want to check that out. Okay, I have 2 thoughts about this now. So I've played it a few times now. And at first I was like, okay, I'll never play without this expansion ever. And I think that would be my preference, because you have the new tech track. It's really cool and really dynamic, and I like lots of special abilities. And after you've played the base game enough, it's good to have those little kind of wrinkles and tweaks around the edges. Really neat. Little combos you got to kind of watch out for or try to take advantage of. And I like the Dreadnought. Dreadnought's a kind of a cool thing, and I like that sort of mechanic. And it kind of takes a part of the game that was a little bit, I don't know if it was too straightforward, but it's a very straightforward path of get the 8 money, get the 3rd worker. Okay, they still want it. That's still a part of the game, but the path to doing so is trickier. It's harder to do, and so I like that. It's not just like get spice. Okay, now I've got to turn. Everybody's racing for the same spot. Those first like 3 rounds. That's kind of like that's just how it is. So I like that they've sort of tweaked that a little bit. There's some other angles and ways to get money and stuff like that are different. So that's good. Before I talk more about the expansion, I will say though, after I've played it a few times, I would still play the basic game, especially with new folks. I would 100% not throw this part in with folks if they were new to the game. I mean, it depends on who it is, Some people, if they don't really like know better, they never played the original, they might just kind of gravitate right into this. But I think it's probably a good idea to play just the base game like it is, because I still really, really like it. There's still a nice elegance and cleanness to just the base game with how the combat and the area control stuff sort of is on a seesaw with all the influence control and some of those big spice cards you can buy at the end of the game for points. And that whole ticking and tacking of like, okay, am I going to get into this battle, or am I going to bluff like I'm getting into this battle, and then maybe I'm not, everybody else is going to commit, so I'm waiting for the next round, and then I'm going to get into that battle and I'll have the advantage because I spent this turn building up. That whole kind of back and forth, sort of dodging in and out of each other, trying to figure out what everybody's doing and what they're up to, that's still really pure and exists, I think, in a great way with the base game. And I think once you start to add in these kind of combos and things, it doesn't muddy it up for me. That still 1000% exists, and that's still really one of the keys of the game. But I think for new players though, those combos and things you might get hung up on a little bit, and it just might be a little too much. Because I for just kind of a personal thing, I think I would prefer people experience the game, experience all that sort of deception and feinting and bluffing part kind of on its own before throwing in all these kind of extra crazy powers and stuff, you know what I mean? So I would still play the base game like that, because that to me, it's enough. Like it does enough, it works well enough. Like I said, it's already like way up in my top 50. But if you had to ask me like, hey, let's play this, I would say, yeah, well, because I'm still really honestly exploring all of these tech tiles and explorations and things like that, and the new cards and the deck that you can buy and the new intrigue cards. So for me, I'd still like, if you asked me to pick one, I'd pick the new expansion and stick with that. But I don't know if, a year down the road, if somebody said, well, everybody knows how to play, but we'd rather not play with the expansion, I'd be like, okay, fine. I'd be into it. So anyway, but yeah, I think this, so if I had to come down on it like kind of a judgment, I would say this expansion is awesome. It's great. I would say get it. But if you say, is it required? Absolutely not. You do not need this expansion to make it a good game or anything like that. And I think it's perfectly fine, whatever buying strategy, to get the base game and check it out, see if you like it, And then after a while, maybe after a year or something, get the expansion once you played the base game a few times. That's great. The other thing I want to mention is I was afraid, I think the first 2 games that I played of it, I was afraid that the Dreadnought was maybe too much of a go-to strategy, but it turns out it's really not, because in the last game I played with it, we played 3-player, and the one player had, we'll call him Billy. Billy had the leader, I forget the name, but where their Dreadnought gets a strength 4 instead of a strength 3. In my head, I'm like, well, I think they're going to win the game because they have the Dreadnought. And the funny thing is, they did win the game, but they did not buy a single Dreadnought the whole game. So they never even used their ability. So that was like a whole half of their card just shut off. It was just not doing anything for them. Now, the other 2 players in our defense, we went after the Dreadnought and we kind of blocked it. We were going out. I was like, well, he can't have the Dreadnought. I've got to go get it. And then so the other player kind of picked up on that. And so we went along. It was a close game. He won, and but he did not use Dreadnought. So I was like, okay. So he even had the 4 strength ability of the Dreadnought, and he still did not even win with a Dreadnought. Now he got points a lot of other different ways. He got his buying engine up. He had some good combos with that to be able to kind of like buy some victory points at the end, get the influence tracks going. He won a couple of battles, right? But again, you don't need the Dreadnought. So that's a good sign. When that happened, I was like, oh, okay, this is great. Because obviously they can be strong in the first 2 games I played of it. They could be very, very strong, in cases, and you can't really ignore them. And in fact, maybe, I don't really have this kind of insight, but maybe me and this other player going after the Dreadnoughts so kind of forcefully, we were leaving lots of other stuff open for this other player. So even like the threat of the Dreadnought, was enough to kind of swing things. But like I said, it was a close game. I don't think there's a problem there. That's what I'm trying to say. But yeah, so I was really great. I was very happy. Like at the end of the game, I was like, oh my God, you won. And you didn't even buy Dreadnought. And you had that ability. I was like, this is fantastic. Even though I lost the game, I was like, this is great. So it's not unbalanced at all. Okay. So yeah, again, I really like this game. I can sit here and gush about it. I've already kind of prefaced all of this. It just hits all of the right buttons for me. The deck building, the multi-use card stuff. Some of the new card abilities are really neat. The destroy card stuff. I already talked about the bluffing and the battles and stuff like that. The technology combos, the combos with your leaders. It's set in Dune, and I like the Dune stuff. Kind of the knife's edge worker placement works really well in kind of a battle game, an area control game. It just does all the right things for me. And the intrigue cards are great. I love that the intrigue cards are more diluted actually, because you just kind of never know what you're going to get out of those. Lots of new card combos. This is great. This is fantastic. I love this game. Okay, that's the review. Thank you.